Welcome back to Soma Psyche. So Caleb and I are here today to have a conversation with you guys and with each other that we're very excited about. I think it sort of takes one of my favorite topics and one of your favorite topics and brings them together, which is really lovely. So we're going to do a little mini series of about 4 videos for you guys about the body and time. Yes, T-I-M-E, that kind of time is an expansive time, and why that is so relevant for somatics and therapy, and particularly somatically oriented therapy. So Caleb, when I brought this idea to you of let's talk about the body and time, what did you think of?
I almost was like, well, yeah, of course. Like there's no better conversation to have, especially in thinking like in therapy, we're used to these pretty rigid sets of time. So it's 50-minute session, 90-minute session. Sometimes we're doing 3-hour intensives. But like qualitatively, there's a big difference between like a 50-minute session that you feel like you did a lot of work and a 50-minute session just whoosh.
Yes.
And I think for us, like the body holds a key dynamic in how much of time we're really in and how much of time just like passes us by in a 50-minute session, 90-minute session, or like an intensive, or if you're doing like a week-long therapy. I mean, that's a lot of time.
Yes.
But it could be not a lot of time, which is so interesting.
It is. So that point kind of brings me to an experience that most of us have had. And this is, completely separate from how traumatic experience alters the perception of time. We'll get to that in a minute. But even in just normal life experience, it's pretty notable that as you get older, you experience spans of time and the passage of time differently. So an hour feels very different when you're 5 years old than it does when you're 50 years old. And they've actually done some research on why is that, and it has to do with our system's noticing of novelty, the way that we interact with our environment and how sensitive we are to novel experience. And so what that means is when we're younger, we're having a lot more novel experiences. So an easy example is when you're 5 years old and you're first learning to brush your teeth. This is a novel experience full of highly somatic and sensory experiences. The flavor of the toothpaste, the weird friction-y feeling of bristles on your gums for the first time, right? Like there's so many things, the hand-eye coordination and oh my gosh, I kind of have a gag reflex thing going on. There's a lot packed into the 2 minutes that you spend brushing your teeth. But over time, your body gets used to it. And as a result, quits paying attention because the stimuli is no longer novel. And because of that, it starts to edit out the experience in terms of it doesn't bring in that information and say, ooh, we need to remember this. This is important.
We need to experience it.
Yeah, we need to savor it or really pay attention and highlight because we're not sure what this means yet. We're still learning about this. It's novel. Over time, the novelty wears off and our body kind of goes, meh, I know about this, right? This is normal. Now, if you change my toothpaste, I might have a weird moment for a second, but
and time slows down for that little bit.
Just that really brief moment, and then we move on. Or if we get a new toothbrush, or remember when electric toothbrushes came out? Yeah. And suddenly we're all having a novel experience.
And they played a song.
Oh, I never had one that played a song.
Okay, well, I did. And this is like the phenomenon of like, if I was brushing my teeth for 2 minutes, which is like the dental standard, recommendation, the 2 minutes without a song felt like eternity because it was just like, when is 2 minutes up? Yeah. But if I had the 2 minutes of the song playing, man, I'm like jamming to the little song.
It's a stimuli that is engaging and And so I think this is a funny but very tangible example of how our body experiences time differently based on this concept of novel stimuli and stimuli that may be important for our survival, for our understanding of our environment, etc. And how much does the body decide to pay attention and bring that subconscious experience into our conscious awareness? So as we get into this conversation, that concept of subconscious material versus conscious material gets really relevant. So I'll let you talk about that for a second.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was thinking about there's so many different ways to talk about these two types. You were talking about novel experience, and there's like the Daniel Kahneman, I think, has in Thinking Fast and Smart. I always get it confused, but I think he goes with experiencing self and observing self. Pongsepp talks about the learning and the memory networks of the brain. And are we learning new information, or are we collapsing into old memory and just formulating what we're experiencing into memory? I personally, with a lot of my clients, talk about the historical self versus the experiencing self. And there's all of these ways to talk about it. And what we're really trying to aim at, or you could do right and left hemispheres, we're really trying to aim at this, like, are we taking our current experience and integrating it new, or are we kind of taking it and putting it into a filing cabinet that we already know? And a lot of times, like our just day-to-day life, some neuroscientists would talk about, like, it would be absurd if we tried to experience everything new. Like, we wouldn't be doing this. We would be so like mesmerized by the fact that we're sitting crisscross applesauce that we wouldn't even be able to talk.
That's true.
So it's an adaptive function of our brain to kind of put in periphery things that are kind of, we've already experienced. It's not new. But in therapy and just kind of learning to grow and develop, what we're looking for are those like specific moments in time where something novel happens and we can tune into it.
Yes.
And then that gets integrated as like another part of us.
Right.
And then that process is where time slows down, because you're really expanding. Oh, okay, there's more of me here. And so I'm participating in the natural flow of life in a moment to moment basis, rather than just taking the combination of many moments and plugging them away into memory.
That's right. Well, so you have used a phrase in the past that I think is really relevant here, which is doing this work, we are time travelers. And so I'm wondering if you can share what you mean by that, because I feel like I understand it. But
Yeah. Another way that like Dan Siegel or some people in the world of interpersonal neurobiology talk about it is we're always remembering the future. So if you think about like all of your experience, which this is kind of like, this may be new to some people, like all of your experience is based on matter. Like you're dependent upon actual material, like neural connections that are produced through electromagnetic impulses. So like, if all you are is matter and your experience is based on matter, your matter, the matter of you, has learned to be a certain way based on your life experience.
Yes.
So anytime you are coming into a current experience in the present, you're using the same matter that you have been using your whole life. And so in that way, your current experience is a current remembering. It's bringing all of you that has been in some fashion into a moment to re-experience as all of you. So then when we talk about in therapy, reprocessing the past, really, I'll say to some clients in kind of like an edgy way, like, there is no such thing as the past.
Right.
Really all there is the way the past is coming into the present. And so we are time traveling, because if we're tapping into the body, we're tapping into the literal way that the body has been impacted and shaped in the past.
That's right.
And we're time traveling, which is so fun to think about. I think for a lot of people that might be like, ugh, I don't know if I like that idea. And I get a lot of pushback of like, well, like, what do you mean you can change the past? It's like, well, I think if you change the way the past shows up in your body, then you are changing the past. You're not changing the episodic memory of what happened, but you are changing the semantic memory of how that is forming you.
And the somatic memory of how it is stored in your cells.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I love that body memory, like physical body memory, can be grouped into like an implicit semantic memory, because your body is making meaning when it's doing things. And to say that your body isn't intellectual feels very minimizing of all of the complex stuff that your body does for you. And it's making meaning of the world all the time.
Well, and I think that for those of us that, work with and study the body deeply, there's this kind of reverence that occurs when we realize that it is doing every bit as much or more thinking as our rational brain is. And it doesn't even need language in order to do it.
Yeah.
That it is so efficient at information processing and decision making that it is not reliant on language in the way that our left hemisphere is and our more cognitive, logical self is. And as a result, it is the part of us that is the most speedy, efficient, able to react and protect us and take care of us. And that is the seat of things that we label as intuition, as, knowing without knowing why. All of those human experiences emerge out of the intelligence of body and its way of processing information at such a rapid speed that it's entirely unconscious or subconscious. And only when it's finished processing, right? Only when there's here's a conclusion, does it finally then emerge into consciousness. And I think for those of us that like to work with the body in therapy, one of the main things that we're doing is this process of time traveling through intentional evocation of the past in this present body. So what that means is we have many methods and different therapies do this different ways. So there's not just one therapy that has figured out how to do this, but we're evoking the past experience in our body. And when we do that, the sensory material and the neurons that hold that information are currently activated, meaning there's electricity running through them and therefore open to change. And when they're open to change, that's when we have that opportunity to make edits to the past in the body and in the way that it is stored in us. So that ability to evoke the past, to actually time travel through the vessel of the body, through the wisdom of the body, evoking the past, opening us up to editing is what therapy is. And when we know how to do this in a really intentional way, we can be very efficient at it.
Yeah.
Not saying we don't run into roadblocks, because the body is always wondering, is this a good idea? Have you really considered the ramifications of these edits?
Yeah.
And so we still have to work with that. But when we know how to work with the natural information processing process that happens in the body, we can target things in a very specific and detailed way.
Yeah. I love that you're bringing up efficiency. And I think this is like the paradox with time is, I'll tell clients that if we have 10 minutes, like if crap hit the fan and we had 10 minutes to work together, I don't want to talk about content at all. No. Because that 10 minutes will fly by. Yeah. What I want to do is find a way to evoke your body into a felt sense that feels uncomfortable or something you want to process through or something of the past that feels like it's haunting the present moment. And I want to evoke that. And then I want them to just look at me and see that there's a caring other there. Yeah. And that 10 minutes can feel like an eternity of just that.
Well, and it's so interesting, like that experience of time in a somatically oriented moment. It is the simultaneous sensation, at least for me, and I'm curious how it feels to you, of we have so much more time and yet it flies by. Right? There's this quality of it of you look up at the clock and you're like, oh dear God, the hour's gone. Yep. And yet when we were in it, it felt like time stopped and we had room. There's this sensation of expansiveness, and we can be in this moment over and over and over together. That feels so spacious, and like I lose track of paying attention to what the clock is doing because we've gone to some other dimension together is what it feels like to me. So I'm curious how you experience that.
Well, yeah. Okay. So if you're going to talk about time from a standpoint of physics, you can't talk about time without also talking about space. Right. And I love the felt phenomenological experience of, like, as we slow down time, we increase space. Because I think it's a common experience, especially in a Western kind of economic world, that this fast pace creates a suffocating feeling in the body. Yes. We lose space. We want to increase lung capacity by slowing down time. Yeah. And you can do that through right brain to right brain, body to body connection. Right. Right. Saying like, there's space here, which is really also saying there's time here. And that is so
effectively done with body-oriented work, so much more than languaged or cognitive-focused work. And we actually have a diagram that we're going to share that I think, and this will be interesting to explore together, actually does a pretty good job of exploring time and space and showing the intricate relationship that they have with each other, and can be something that we teach our clients, that we use to conceptualize what we're doing with clients. And so we want to share it with everybody. So I'm curious, like, before we go into that, how would you want to kind of wrap up this little introduction of the body in time?
Yeah, I think a lot of people have an economic view of time. Time is money. It's like a common phrase. And I often am working with consultees and just even myself and other clinicians of like, how do I make the most of 50 minutes or 90 minutes? And I think having that moment of realizing I can talk about a lot and time goes by and nothing gets done. We're just remembering the same Groundhog Day. Yeah. But I can also, or an other alternative is I could tap into the experiencing self of every moment, like with my client in session, and time suddenly feels very expansive.
Yes.
And that's why I think we have this emphasis on working with the bottom-up processes of the body and the brain rather than trying to work about them or against them.
Right. Excellent. Yeah, I think where my mind goes is this is such a perfect kind of furthering and deepening of what we taught in the last series around Jenlin's focusing process. That is one way of doing this. And if you guys have tried the process of focusing, in that you begin to experience how time starts to bend and morph a bit. That it gets a bit wobbly in terms of our usual experience of the passage of time, that there's something about that descent into self that slows down or pauses time or allows a moment to be experienced over and over in layers, and it creates that sensation of expansiveness. And so I think that, this is both the theoretical and the practical furthering of that, which is, a really lovely process to go through together. And I think for me, part of why the body and time ends up being so important is because if we want to make sustained change, we have to actually be working with the way things are physically stored in our organismic self. If we're only working with the air-like quality of thought that has very little substance to it, we don't get the kind of deep-rooted change that we really want to offer our clients. And so working in this way helps us to actually get to the core of the thing in a very efficient and, personally, I think a deeply respectful way of working, because the body will alert us very quickly if we're treading on anything that we shouldn't be touching. And so it teaches us to be careful, to go mindfully into the terrain of what is held here, and it teaches our clients to do the same. And so this way of working, to me, feels incredibly supportive towards the goal of what we're really trying to do, which is deep, spontaneous change, where the client is not having to effort for the rest of their life to maintain it, but it really feels now rooted in the cells of who they are. So this way of working is my favorite.
It's the paradox of, if you want to go farther, you have to go slower. If you want to go faster, you need to pause for a second.
That's right. And we need ways of explaining that to our clients so they understand why we're inviting them over and over into the spaces and places that we are. Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for watching this intro. In the next video, we'll share a diagram with you about the relationship between body and time.